Good morning. It's August 7th. This is to my liberal friends. It's August and Washington, D.C. has become a ghost town as it normally does in August. And I normally stay on politics, but I'm going to digress today and talk a little bit about college sports. And I would remind everybody that politicians are starting to look at college sports as well. This past week, the Pac-12 conference all but died. It will exist for one more year, but beginning in 2024, there's only going to be 4 teams left. And this is a conference that has existed for over 100 years. It was a regional conference, just like most of the other conferences of universities around the nation. But eventually, money and media attention intervened, and suddenly it was about chasing the dollar and not athletic competition. The Atlantic Coast Conference was one of the first to make this move when they expanded and added schools from Boston to Miami. This all but killed the Big East Conference, which now exists solely as a basketball conference. But it's not what it used to be, with several of its marquee teams having defected to other conferences for football. The Big Ten jumped next, and they added Maryland and Rutgers. And this was not about athletic competition, but all about money. This put the Big Ten channel on the basic tier cable outlets in New York and D.C. markets. This meant millions of dollars flowing into the coffers of the conference. And they added Nebraska from the Big 12. That meant the Southeast Conference had to act, and they had already added Missouri and Texas A&M. And then last year, the current wave started with Texas and Oklahoma announcing they were moving to the SEC. Now, I've lamented that the Pac-12 is on its own deathbed, but much of it was their own doing. A little over a decade ago, they tried to tempt Texas and Oklahoma to join them. They added Colorado from the Big 12, and the plan was for Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M to follow. But that did not work out. Texas A&M bolted to the Southeast Conference, and the other two opted to stay put in the Big 12. And that meant the Pac had to add one more team, and so they poached Utah from the Mountain West Conference. They ignored Brigham Young University because they would not fit politically with the West Coast with their affiliation with the Mormon Church. And as I've said, all this movement is rooted in money. The Big 12 has hired a savvy new commissioner, Brett Yormark, who jumped the line and negotiated a new media deal with both ESPN and Fox. After Texas and Oklahoma had bolted to the SEC, he quickly added Cincinnati, Houston, Central Florida, and BYU. That media deal put the Pac-12 in a precarious position. Location had always been a problem for them, as the majority of Americans are heading to bed when their games are starting, particularly basketball games. The Pac-12 kept promising they would have a new media deal and it would surpass the Big 12's numbers. But promising and delivering are two different things. The primetime slots were already allocated to the other major conferences. Nobody wanted to make a significant bid for their media package. In the end, it was reported that Apple TV would take their games and stream them on their app and pay each team about $21 million with incentives. And that was enough for Colorado to make the jump back to the Big 12. For about 2 weeks, the rest of the league stewed about what to do next. There were multiple statements of bravado about how they would stick together and eventually get a strong media deal. But that was for public consumption and not what was going on behind closed doors. Arizona was engaged in deep discussions with the Big 12. Then it became known that the Big 10 was again talking to Oregon and Washington about expansion. Suddenly the picture was clear, and Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State headed to the Big 12, and the 2 Northwest schools were accepted to the Big 10. That left Stanford, California, Oregon State, and Washington State behind, and their future is pretty cloudy. Again, it was money that drove all this movement. University athletic programs have an unquenchable appetite for more money and newer and shinier facilities. They're paying coaches millions of dollars, and then these same schools come begging the state and federal lawmakers for more money. They're offering fluff degrees to athletes to keep them eligible because most of them are not there for an education, but just to play football and basketball. The Ed O'Banion case opened the door for college athletes to cash in their name, image, and likeness, and further fueled the money race. The NCAA had worked for decades to keep boosters out of the picture, and now they could walk in the front door. Athletes were being promised lucrative financial deals if they would play for one school or another. Coaches were not supposed to be involved in those deals, but who really believes that to be true? Congress is finally getting into the act. 3 senators, Richard Blumenthal, Jerry Moran, and Cory Booker, have circulated a draft bill to bring some order to the financial aspects of these deals. I'll tell you that in my opinion, this is just a precursor to college athletics becoming employees of the university and be paid by the university to play for them. In California, they have a bill moving that would allow athletes to unionize and enter into collective bargaining. Excuse me, but I thought colleges and universities were a place to get an education. If you were good enough to get a scholarship in a particular sport, then you got that education without putting money out of your own pocket. But that seems to be an outdated idea. Here's my suggestion. If an athlete uses up his or her 4 years of eligibility, it can't control an athlete that opts to go professional early and does not graduate, then that school should be forced to forfeit a scholarship the next season. That would at least put the schools on notice that they're there to educate students, including athletes, and not just make money off them. This has been To My Liberal Friends. I appreciate you listening. If you enjoy the podcast, hit the subscription button. Recommend it to your friends. If you have a comment, please leave it.